For decades, Jim Carrey has brought laughter to audiences, yet the circumstances of his personal life have often sparked as much intrigue as his professional accomplishments. Beyond the over-the-top physical comedy, major motion pictures, and lasting fame, there were tangled relationships, internal battles, highly publicized separations, and lingering rumors that never fully disappeared. Even as he ascended to become one of Hollywood's most prominent figures, his private affairs continued to draw nearly as much focus as the work that made him a household name. Through marriages and heartache, onlookers have spent years trying to decipher what was truly happening behind that famous smile. Now, fresh remarks have pushed those old suspicions back into the limelight. Born James Eugene Carrey in Newmarket, Ontario, he was raised in a Catholic family with his parents and 3 older siblings. His mother, Kathleen, managed the home, while his father, Percy, earned a living as both a musician and an accountant. From a very young age, Jim distinguished himself from other children. At 8, he would stand before a mirror and twist his face into various expressions, gradually realizing he had a natural ability for mimicry. By 10, he was confident enough to send a letter to Carol Burnett, claiming he was already skilled at impressions and deserved a spot on her program. He even received a reply, which meant a great deal to him. However, despite his obvious talent, home life was anything but easy. The family moved around Ontario, from Scarborough to Burlington, and at one point, their financial troubles grew so severe that they became homeless, residing in a Volkswagen van. Jim and his brother also spent months living in a tent near Charles Daly Park, close to Lake Ontario. Things improved slightly when his father found employment at a tire factory, but that came with a price. In return for housing near the factory, Jim and his older brother had to work there as well, performing lengthy overnight shifts as janitors and security guards. Jim later went back to school in Scarborough, but on his 16th birthday, he dropped out. By then, he was already chasing a comedy career while still bearing the burden of his family's struggles, a mix that would influence everything to come. Jim's first venture into stand-up happened in 1977 when he was only 15. His father helped him develop an act and drove him to Yuck Yucks in downtown Toronto. His mother even chose his outfit, convinced that was the style worn on the Dean Martin Celebrity Roast. Unfortunately, the evening went badly. His impressions failed to resonate with the crowd, and someone later described the performance as bad Rich Little. It was a rough beginning and shook his self-assurance. Still, Jim refused to quit. As his family's finances improved and they moved into a new house in Jackson's Point, he returned to comedy in 1979 with a far stronger routine. That led to his first paying job, a 20-minute set that earned him $20 Canadian. Afterward, he went back to Yuck Yucks, the same place where he had previously failed, and gradually became a regular performer. He was still young, but his reputation was starting to grow. Around the same time, he also auditioned for Saturday Night Live for the 1980-81 season, though he was not chosen. He took a voice role on a local overnight television show and kept performing around Toronto and neighboring towns. In 1981, he was scheduled to open for a rock band in Barrie, but the audience booed him off the stage. 2 weeks later, things changed again when a favorable piece in the Toronto Star called him a genuine star coming to life. That kind of praise gave his career real momentum. Soon after, he appeared on an evening at the Improv and secured his first acting role in a TV movie called Introducing Janet, where he portrayed a struggling impressionist comic. By then, he was becoming well known across Canada. Rodney Dangerfield noticed him and signed him to open for his tour. There was even discussion of The Tonight Show being his next major step. Suddenly, Jim was no longer just a local performer. He was becoming someone people were beginning to watch closely. In early 1983, Jim moved to Hollywood with a clear goal. He wanted The Tonight Show. For a moment, it seemed like it would happen, but after a one-week club set, he was removed from a booking, a disappointment that certainly hurt. Nonetheless, he persisted. He performed at the Comedy Store, returned to Toronto for shows, and was even featured on the Canadian program W5. Shortly thereafter, he landed the lead role in the NBC sitcom The Duck Factory and also obtained a supporting part in the film Finders Keepers. In late 1983, He finally made it onto The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, delivering a rapid series of impressions. Carson gave him an okay sign, but did not invite him to the couch afterward, suggesting the reaction was positive but not an overwhelming success. The sitcom itself did not last long, and Jim went back to touring. He then got film roles in Once Bitten and Peggy Sue Got Married, but his bigger dream of joining Saturday Night Live kept slipping away. He tried again in 1985 and again in 1986, and both times he was rejected. On that last attempt, Dana Carvey and Phil Hartman were selected instead. By then, Jim began to realize that impressions alone were not enough. So he pushed himself to evolve, starting to build a new act with more characters and observational humor, even if it meant upsetting comedy club owners and confusing audiences who expected his old style. That change proved significant. From 1990 to 1994, he became a regular on In Living Color, and that show finally gave him a national platform. Then came the year that transformed his life. In 1994, Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, made him a hit. The Mask followed and became a massive success worldwide. Then Dumb and Dumber did the same. In a single year, Jim Carrey went from a rising comic to one of Hollywood's biggest stars. The success continued with Batman Forever, Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, The Cable Guy, and Liar Liar. By the mid-1990s, he was not just famous, he was one of the biggest comedy stars in the world. As Jim's career exploded, people also grew more curious about his private life. Long before his greatest fame, he dated singer Linda Ronstadt for 8 months in 1983. Then, on March 28, 1987, he married Melissa Womer, a former actress and Comedy Store waitress. They had one daughter together, and for a time, this seemed like a more stable chapter in his life. But the marriage did not endure. Jim and Melissa divorced in 1995, right around the time his career was reaching an entirely new level. Not long after, on September 23, 1996, he married his Dumb and Dumber co-star Lauren Holly. That marriage ended in less than a year. So, while the public saw a movie star making millions and packing theaters, his personal life was much less steady. That contrast made people pay even more attention. They saw the enormous success, but they also saw the broken relationships, the changes, and a pattern of a man whose private world did not appear as smooth as his public image. At the same time, Jim was also open about his spiritual side. He spoke about the law of attraction and said that when he was still struggling, he would picture success before it arrived. He even mentioned imagining a $10 million check for acting services rendered, keeping that image with him, and years later, receiving one for Dumb and Dumber. He also practiced transcendental meditation. All of this added to the picture people had of him. A man who was funny, intense, driven, and always seeking something deeper. Behind the comedy, there was struggle, ambition, heartbreak, and a personal life that kept people wondering what was really happening beneath the surface. By the late 1990s, Jim Carrey was already a huge star, but he wanted to show he could do more than loud comedy. In 1998, he accepted less money to star in The Truman Show, playing Truman Burbank. That decision paid off significantly. The film was praised, became a commercial success, and brought him even more respect around the world. Many thought this would finally earn him an Oscar nomination, but it did not happen. He did win the Golden Globe for Best Actor in a Motion Picture Drama, and one critic noted that the film allows Carrey to edge away from broad comedy, calling it a hilarious and breathtakingly conceived satire. That same year, he also appeared as a made-up version of himself in the final episode of The Larry Sanders Show, where he sharply went after Gary Shandling's character. Then, in 1999, he took on another major role in Man on the Moon, portraying comedian Andy Kaufman. Once again, the praise was strong. Once again, he won a Golden Globe, and once again, an Oscar nomination did not come. He did, however, receive his first Screen Actors Guild Award nomination for Best Actor. So, even while the biggest film honor kept passing him by, Jim was clearly entering a new stage of his career. Soon, that change would spill into both his work and his private life. In 2000, Jim returned to broad comedy with Me, Myself, and Irene. The reviews were mixed, but the film did well, and it also became part of his personal story, because he was engaged to his co-star Renee Zellweger from 1999 to 2000. That same year, he played the lead in How the Grinch Stole Christmas, which became one of the biggest Christmas hits ever, even as critics were divided. In 2003, he starred in Bruce Almighty, which made huge amounts of money worldwide. Then, in 2004, he delivered what one reviewer called his best, most mature, and sharply focused performance ever, in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. He earned more praise, another Golden Globe nomination, and his first BAFTA nomination. That same year, he appeared in Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, and one critic defended his style by saying, "If you can't let Carrey be Carrey, put someone boring and less expensive in the role." Also in 2004, he became a U.S. citizen while remaining a dual citizen of both the United States and Canada. In the years that followed, he stayed busy with fun with Dick and Jane, Horton Hears a Who, Yes Man, I Love You Philip Morris, A Christmas Carol, and Mr. Popper's Penguins. Not every film was loved, especially the number 23, which was heavily criticized, but he kept moving between comedy, voice work, and more serious parts. Off-screen, his life remained just as watched. He has said he dealt with depression and used Prozac for years, later stating that he no longer takes medication and avoids coffee, alcohol, and drugs. In 2002, he was in a relationship with January Jones. In 2005, he met Jenny McCarthy, and by June 2006, they made their relationship public. They split in April 2010, though McCarthy later said they had remained good friends. Then, in early 2011, he was seen holding hands with Anchal Joseph, which quickly led to dating talk. By then, his private life had clearly become part of the public story around him. The most painful and serious part of this story centered on Catriona White. Jim met Catriona in 2012. She was a makeup artist from County Tipperary, Ireland. They dated on and off between 2012 and 2015. She was also married to Mark Burton in 2013 in Las Vegas, and she remained married while still in an on-and-off relationship with Jim. Their relationship was described by others as intense and unstable. One close friend told police that she was usually cheerful and upbeat, but sometimes became really down. The same friend said she missed her family in Ireland and was madly in love with Jim, despite what was described as a roller coaster relationship that already painted a complicated picture. Then everything changed in September 2015. On September 28th, Catriona White was found dead in a residence in Sherman Oaks, California. The cause was a prescription drug overdose, and the Los Angeles coroner later ruled the death a suicide. Jim was not distant from this moment. He served as a pallbearer at her funeral in Capawhite, Ireland, which showed how personally close this tragedy still was to him. After her passing, he released a deeply emotional statement calling her "my sweet Catriona," and saying she was a truly kind and delicate Irish flower, too sensitive for this soil, to whom loving and being loved was all that sparkled. He added, "We have all been hit with a lightning bolt." At that point, many people saw him as a grieving man dealing with a heartbreaking loss. But that image would soon be challenged in a very public way, and what came next would become one of the darkest chapters of his public life. In September 2016, nearly a year after Catriona's death, her estranged husband, Mark Burton, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Jim Carrey. The lawsuit claimed that Jim had used his immense wealth and celebrity status to illegally obtain and distribute prescription drugs that were involved in her death. According to the claims, Jim had supposedly acquired pills under the name Arthur King, with help from a doctor, and those drugs were later used in the overdose. Burton argued that Catriona's past depression and earlier suicide attempts should have made it clear that giving her access to such drugs was dangerous. The lawsuit stated that the result that followed was foreseeable and predictable. The accusations went even further. Burton's side claimed Jim had surveillance cameras watching Catriona, and that neither he nor his assistant alerted authorities even after noticing that she had not left the house for 24 hours. Another claim was that Jim sent Catriona a text message on September 27th, after she was already dead, asking about missing prescriptions. Burton's side argued that this was not an innocent message, but a cover-up, saying Jim knew full well what had happened and was trying to protect himself. Burton also claimed Jim offered to pay for the funeral to appear generous, but later backed away. Publicly, Burton said he wanted to destroy the idea of Jim as a grieving good guy, arguing that his behavior before and after Catriona's death had been careless and dishonest. At that point, the story was no longer just about grief. It had become a legal fight over responsibility, image, and what the public was supposed to believe. The case grew even uglier when more allegations became public. Another wave of attention came when text messages allegedly exchanged between Jim and Catriona were released. Some of those messages showed Catriona talking about deceased loved ones during Christmas, only for Jim to allegedly interrupt with a crude sexual question. Other messages suggested she was worried about sexually transmitted infections and wanted to get checked. At one point, Jim allegedly replied, "Aggravated follicles or bumps are normal when you shave or have vigorous sex." In another exchange, when she worried more openly, he told her, "I hope you're okay, hon. It could be from someone before me. Doesn't show up until you're really stressed. It should be fine, though." Shortly afterward, Catriona discovered she had herpes type 1, herpes type 2, and gonorrhea. Burton's side used all of this to argue that Jim's public image was false, saying Jim Carrey's public persona is a fraud, and adding that he was someone who could text about his body in the same breath as deceased loved ones at Christmas. Burton's lawyer said they had recovered nearly every text, picture, and email between them and claimed the evidence would show that Jim and his team were not shooting straight with the media or the public. Jim strongly denied the accusations. In response to the lawsuit, he said, "What a terrible shame." He added that he could have made the case go away quietly, but that there are some moments in life when you have to stand up and defend your honor against the evil in this world. He also said, "I will not tolerate this heartless attempt to exploit me or the woman I loved," and insisted that Kat's troubles were born long before I met her. And sadly, her tragic end was beyond anyone's control. His lawyer, Marty Singer, also pushed back hard, calling the lawsuit full of falsehoods, and saying Catriona stole the pills rather than receiving them from Jim. So the public was left watching two completely different stories unfold at once. One painting Jim as a reckless star hiding behind his fame, and the other painting him as a grieving man being exploited after a tragedy. By early 2026, Jim Carrey was back in the spotlight, and not just because he received an honorary César Award in Paris on February 26th. The bigger surprise was how much public attention his appearance garnered. Photos and videos from the event spread quickly online, and many people focused on how different he looked. Some said he appeared unrecognizable, while others even pushed the idea that it was not really him at all, but a look-alike. That talk grew even more when drag artist Alexis Stone shared a post that seemed to suggest he had impersonated Carrey, showing event images alongside a mask, fake teeth, and a wig. But Jim Carrey's representative made it clear that it really was him. And César Awards delegate Gregory Collier also shut down the rumors. He explained that Carrey had worked on his speech in French for months, asking about the exact pronunciation of words, and said he came with his partner, his daughter, his grandson, and other close family and friends. That same night also revealed something much more personal. During his speech, which he delivered fully in French, Jim publicly confirmed his relationship with Jeanette, also known as Min A. He called her his sublime companion and said, "I love you, Min." She was seated with his daughter, Jane, and his grandson, Jackson, showing just how close she already was to his family. So, what began as a major honor in Paris quickly turned into a night of rumors, surprise, and a very public declaration of love that brought his private life right back into the conversation. Do you think the public has always seen the real Jim Carrey, or has there always been more going on behind the image? And after everything that has come out over the years, has your view of him changed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history.